Morning, everybody. There was this priest. You remember the jokes, some of you? They're not very funny. I do. I think they're funny as hell. No one else does. But there was this priest who went into this bar. Now, he's an Irish priest. And he goes in the bar and he orders 3 Irish beers. And the bartender says, "I don't understand, Father. Why do you ask for 3 beers to line up in front of you?" He says, "Well, my brothers are still in Ireland. And we used to, every day, we would stop and we'd have a beer. And so I do this symbolically." "Oh, well, that's very nice. Very, very nice." So the priest drinks his 3 beers and leaves. And comes in and does his thing and then leaves again. So one day he comes in and he orders 2 beers. And the bartender says, "Father, I don't understand. All this time you come in and you order 3 beers and symbolically because you have these 2 brothers in Ireland. Why is it you only ordered 2 today?" He said, "Well, I've given up beer for Lent." Sounds like a good alcoholic to me. All right. Since I last talked to you guys, you can see that I have this new title. And somebody once said, "All good deeds go unpunished," or "No good deed goes unpunished." And so, anyway, I'm still working with addicts. I'm still working with Diamond Healthcare and trying to take care of the problems that we certainly have when it comes to addiction and the opiate epidemic. And are you guys aware, by the way, that we will start seeing a rise in cocaine addiction once again? The Mexican cartel has gone down to Central America and attempted to oust the people down there, and it looks like it's happening. And they anticipate a 50% increase now on cocaine being shipped to the United States. So now we got that, and then we all know that people will use cocaine and coke, or coke and some kind of a narcotic all at the same time for speedballing. So we got another problem coming. Just never seems to stop. All right, what they asked me to do is to come in and do another presentation. Darlene, she said that she didn't have anybody else, so would I please come in and do something? That's, of course, when I was no longer her boss. Anyway, I want to talk about anger and resentments this morning. And one of the things that I've known throughout my entire career of working with human beings and specifically addicts and their families is that people in general do not know how to deal with anger very well. We can look around the country, we can look around our relationships, we can look and see that people really do struggle in understanding how to deal with anger and resentments in an effective way. And most of us, at one time or another, we just don't get mad. We're going to get even. As somebody once said, "I just didn't get mad and want to get even. I wanted to get ahead of them." And so some of us even want to be so aggressive that we want to pay them back so that it looks like we won. And of course, none of that helps relationships with ourselves or for relationships outside of ourselves. And so hopefully by the time I'm done this morning, you'll have some ideas on anger and some more effective ways to deal with it, how it affects us as human beings, etc. And I know that, and last time I did this, I thought you all did a great job of giving input, etc. You know, as I said the last time, there's other ways to look at life than I do as a clinician, but this is just my way. And so you can believe what I have to say, or you can just throw it away. It's up to you. No, I know anybody here in Nebraska, a Cornhusker fan besides me? Okay, we're done for the day. We're done. Move along. That's ridiculous. I can't believe that. Yeah, well, all right. We'll move right along then. Now I'm going to find a way to get even with all of you. Now, so when we look at anger and resentments, I think first thing we have to talk about what causes anger. And oftentimes people don't understand that anger is caused by primarily four things. One is guilt. When we feel guilty, there's a number of us, instead of wanting to express the guilt, what we want to do is blame somebody else and be angry with them because they made us do that. Kids, for example, they may do something that steps outside of their belief system, and they'll blame their brother or sister because they feel bad about what they did and say, they made me do this. Spouses will do that to one another. We'll do it to our own children. Our children will do us as parents. I mean, it's just kind of part of what we do. Our co-workers. So we know guilt helps to promote anger. We know that when people feel hurt's a very sensitive feeling. It's a very private feeling for most of us. And when we feel hurt, we get angry. Anger is used as a protector then. To protect the guilt, to protect the hurt, so that what happens is that the person doesn't know they've created that we had that kind of pain for what happened. So we react in anger in a defensive way, in a way to protect whatever pain that we're experiencing. And then we have fear. Fear is probably the most driving factor, most driving feeling when it comes to anger. When you think about it, people are driven by fear. And I know people will disagree with me on that, and that's okay. Everybody has a right to their opinion, and my opinion is always right. Making sure you're awake this morning. Oh, he's actually laughing at my jokes for a change. Dorian over here, he's one of these guys that he gets so doggone angry with me because I'm always right, and he's afraid that he's never right. And so what he does, he runs around pouting all the time. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Isn't that right? Anyway, fear. If somebody cuts you off on the highway and you're going 65 miles an hour, you react in anger because you're scared something just happened that you could have been hurt. Somebody accuses you or calls you a name, it hurts, and you're scared they're going to do the same thing again, so you react in anger. Or what happens is that you think about how that fear is so much a part of our lives that as human beings, somebody once wrote that as human beings that we're driven by hundreds and hundreds of fears. And then the question was, what fear are you talking about? What time of what day and what is the situation? And then when you put all those together, the didn't make it on the screen. It's control. And that's what the anger then is used on. That was, by the way, I did these myself, and so when I had good old Michelle as my administrative assistant, she took care of all that. And I screwed up. She said, "Now you got to do it this way." Now you can see it's mine. So let me back up. Control. That anger becomes an element of control to protect the hurt, the fear, and the guilt. And if you think about it, way back when there was the Cold War going on, what did we do as a country? We built bombs, weapons, bigger bombs, bigger weapons, bigger bombs, bigger weapons, in an effort to control our fear, in an effort to control the anxiety that we have. And of course, that horrible day of 2001, because we got comfortable, because we were the only ones left. And then all that anxiety came back. And now we got, our whole culture's changed as a result. And it continues to change, and I don't want to get into politics, but it continues to change. And so, ma'am?
Well, it just dawned on me, I've always known this, and it makes sense, but the greatest defense is the offense, like in football too. And that's exactly what we do when we get frightened.
Exactly. We do it as individuals, and because cultures are made up of individuals, The process goes on. So it impacts us socially, and this lady here and I was just talking about how that socially we're impacted. We're impacted as we interact with our friends and our families, our culture. We're impacted in such a way that what happens is that we pay, and our family pays, our friends pay, our culture pays severe consequences because we're not dealing with our anger in an effective way. All the shootings, all the beatings, all the rapes, all the assaults. So our culture, and this anger, not dealing with it effectively and affecting us socially, that's been going on for centuries. This isn't anything new. There's a very old book that talked about how one of the brothers killed one of the other brothers. So it's been going on for a long time. So it affects us socially, it affects us physically. And when we talk about how it affects us physically, there's a whole slew of physiological problems that occur when we don't deal with our anger effectively. And one of the things that people don't often understand, and I'll talk more about it later, is that stress is a mild form of anger. And people don't often recognize that. Because what is stress? When you think about it, having to listen to me on a Friday morning is stressful as hell. So why would you be stressed? You go home, you've had a hard day, people, patients are easy to deal with, right? Clients, whatever you call them. I mean, they're the easiest people on earth to deal with. Yeah, right. You do your job for about this long, they love you, and the moment later, they don't like you because you didn't do something right. And so it's very stressful dealing with the populations that we deal with. It's not an easy to deal. So we get this stress going on, and there's impact with us physically. As I said, we'll talk a lot more about that, or I will here in a little bit. And then there's psychological issues that go along with this. And one of the biggest psychological issues that go along with this is self-pity and resentments. And that's why I have the words anger and resentments, because resentments come from anger. Somebody told me a long time ago, all that a resentment is reliving old anger. Over, right? Yeah. Over and over and over. We get it in our head, and amazing, the person who we have this resentment towards, they may not even know. They may be deceased. They may not care. But yet we keep carrying it on and carrying it on. That person could be across the country, but they might as well live in the same house with us because of that resentment that we hold on to and hold on to. And of course we add water to it and we add fertilizer to it and get it all stirred up and keep making it grow. See, Dorian's resented me a lot since he met me. He goes down the hallway singing, "I want to be like Don," as he skips. I'm expecting some laughter, guys, or I'm going to go back to my jokes. You're not going to like this. All right. And then spiritually. Last time I talked about the 12 steps, and I talked about how spirituality really has to do with having a positive relationship with me and everything outside of myself. Well, you can't have a positive relationship with yourself or anything outside of yourself if you don't deal with your anger in an effective way. Because it will haunt you and haunt you and haunt you. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. I'm walking around too much? Okay. All right. Socially. We tend to act our anger out one of two ways, either aggressively or passive-aggressively. No one is totally, by the way, aggressive, and nobody is totally passive-aggressive, but we tend to favor one over the other. We tend to favor one over the other. Certain circumstances we may become aggressive, whereas certain circumstances we may be passive-aggressive. For example, when you look at people that are aggressive, what happens is that when they get angry, they'll shout. Their voice increases. My wife, for example, when she's angry with me, man, the whole neighborhood hears it. She's sitting over there, so my whole neighborhood hears it. Or what happens is the person will stomp around. Right? Or what happens is that they'll make threats. And the thing about threats, they're only as good as the person being threatened believes it can be carried out. So if I have a 5-year-old telling me he's going to kick my butt, I'm really not going to worry about it. But if this gentleman here says to me, and he pulls this big old 44 Red Hawk out, and it's about this big, and he says, I'm going to hurt you, and I believe he will, that threat worked. So threats only work if the person being threatened believes that it can occur. And then there's physical abuse that occurs. Could be physical violence towards the person. It could be physical violence towards a wall. It could be just people flinging things. We'll talk more about all this in a minute. But that whole idea of this physical acting out is a way to control the other person. Because that's all aggression is an effort to control the people or the environment around them. Oh, absolutely. They want control. They're going to tell you that this is how I want it done. You will do it my way, or you'll get more of this. Well, long time ago, there's different types of mentality with the rapist, and so again, from my memory, it's all about some form of wanting to control the other person and not take and be responsible for my own whatever's going on with me. It's been a long time since I've looked at that, but it seems to me there's like 3 or 4, maybe somebody knows more, but 3 or 4 different types of rapists, but it all still comes back to the same mentality-wise, the same type of thinking processes. The bottom line is, with those examples that I gave you about people being aggressive, what's that remind you of? A 5-year-old. When a 5-year-old child doesn't get what they want, they throw a temper tantrum. I'm not going to love you anymore. Oh, great, fine, go to your room. How many times have you been in a grocery store or in some kind of a store and this little child isn't getting what they want? The next thing you know, you hear this ranting and raving and screaming and stomping and all the tears and all the stuff that goes along with that. Those are called what? Temper tantrums. But it's amazing, when we become adults, we don't call those temper tantrums anymore. We're telling people, well, how we feel. Really? That's not how you tell somebody you feel, by throwing a temper tantrum, by making a threat, by calling them a name, by physically acting out. And we have kids that act that way. What do? We give them consequences. We ignore them. We send them to the room. We put them in the corner. Some people pop them on the butt. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's a way to do what? To help them to quit behaving in such an irresponsible fashion. And it's always amazed me, when we become big people, it's okay for us to do that. And of course our kids are watching us do that, and then we don't understand where our kids get those ideas. And we're going, well, how did he learn to do that? How did she learn to do that? Well, what does mom and dad do? That doesn't make mom and dad responsible for everybody's behavior, but they learn that from their environment. They learn that from what we do, wherever it's from. School, I don't care. They're not born with that information. And people that are aggressive will become passive aggressive, depending on the environment. For example, when we look at passive aggressive, some of the examples of what a passive aggressive person looks like, they're the person, when they get angry, they quit talking to you. They won't say a word to you. They'll glare. They'll use sarcasm. You know, the sarcastic remarks that you see so much on the comedies of the sitcoms. One sarcastic remark after another, and ha ha ha. But it's not funny when it's a serious situation. They will withdraw. They'll physically get up and walk out of the room. Or if you look at them and try to talk to them, you can see in their eyes as you're talking to them, they're not paying a bit of attention to what you're saying. Not one doggone thing. You can see they're not listening to a doggone thing. You don't know where they're at, but they're not there with you. Or what happens is they act out sexually. They will they withhold sex because they're angry. What they do is that they'll have sex with somebody else. Now, you may never know they have sex with somebody else, but they know, and it's a way to pay you back. Or what will happen is that they will have sex with your neighbor, your friend, your brother, your cousin, your mom, whatever it is. What did you say? She said, well, that's all pretty nice. What the, whoa! Anybody specialize in sexual stuff around here? Unbelievable. Ma'am. Can be. Can be. So I'm not going to have sex with you, so I'll get involved with porn, and I'll take care of my needs, and I know you don't like me with the porn, and there you go. Now go fix that one. And so that certainly can be. It makes sense. But the people that are basically aggressive, depending on the circumstances, will become passive-aggressive, and passive-aggressive people will become aggressive. Those people that are basically aggressive do not get in front of a judge, and the judge says, before I decide what I want to do with you, do you have anything to say? So this gentleman here, what he does not do, he does not stand there and go, yeah, Your Honor, this is for you. Now, I know you got a mama somewhere. That one's for her. Now, why won't you do that? Because it's not very smart. Now, there are a few people that are not very bright that'll do that. But most of us know better than that because we know the ramifications that's associated with those behaviors. There's guys and gals running around there with guns and handcuffs and clubs, and we don't want to go to jail. And we just want that judge to be nice to us and give us the benefit of the doubt, if they will, and get the least intense sentence that he or she can give us. But let us leave that courtroom when we're no longer around that judge. Roar! Now, 3 years ago, I got caught speeding up in New Kent County. Oh, you think that's funny, do you?
I got one too.
You get caught speeding in New Kent County, because I live in New Kent County, man, that's how they make their money. And there ain't no talking them out of it. They pulled me over, and of course sir, do you know how fast you're going? No, I did. No. Well, sir, you're doing this. Why would you be traveling so fast? Well, I'm a doctor. What kind of doctor are you? Oh, damn. I says, well, I'm a PhD. Oh, you're not a real doctor. I'm going to give you a ticket. He did. So, of course, I got caught. I wiggle out of these things in the past doing the same thing. It didn't work that way this time. So I got the ticket, went to court. And and so here I am in court. And everybody gets their turn, and I'm thinking, don't irritate the judge before I get up there, please, because she looked like she was meaner than a junkyard dog, and I don't need any hassles. So my turn, whenever it got to be around my turn, and there's this young man, about 19, maybe 22 years, 19 and 20 years of 22, whatever, young guy. And he gets up in front of that judge, and the judge, apparently he had some problems with the sheriff's office. And he wants to argue with the judge about what the sheriff's officer did to him. And she said, well, you need to take that with the sheriff. No, ma'am, he told me to talk to you. She said, you know what? You need to take that up with the sheriff. And he wants you to argue. He wanted to argue with her. And she said, now, young man, I'm going to ask you not to say anything and just follow my direction here. He wouldn't do it. And you could see the people in the courtroom, going through their handcuffs. I'm going, oh, this isn't good. And he wouldn't shut up. She told him 3 times to knock it off. And finally she says, okay, I'm holding you in contempt of court. You're going to spend the next 24, 48 hours, I think it was 48 hours, or 72 hours as a matter of fact, and then we come back to court. He said, well, I'm a William & Mary student, and I have some finals to study for and to take. She says, not now, you don't. They put his handcuffs and escorted him right out of there. I get called up the second person after him. God almighty. Anyway, the point is that some people don't know when to shut up. And normally people, I was yes ma'am, no ma'am, and all that stuff because I didn't want to go the same way. I'd been there before, and you don't irritate judges, and I've done that in the past when I was active in my addiction, and I learned a lot. You don't do that stuff. And this young man, he hadn't figured it out yet, and hopefully he will. But most of us don't get in front of a judge and act that way. This passive aggressiveness, we know that people will eventually become aggressive because it's like a volcano. It stores up and it stores up and it stores up, and then boom, the explosion occurs. Those of us that got some gray hair, we remember from the 80s when the gentleman in Oklahoma went into the post office and became postal. Thus the term postal. He was very quiet, very reserved. Nobody knew much about him. He was very polite, blah, blah, blah. Comes in one day and starts blowing people away. And thus the term going postal came. Obviously, he had a lot of stuff going on, but eventually people will explode and then become very aggressive and then do all the things that I mentioned when it comes to aggressiveness. Now, there are people with being passive-aggressive will go to the extremes. I had a family member one time that her husband would come home drunk and he would be verbally abusive. I don't remember if he was physical, but he was verbally abusive for sure. And when he'd come home drunk, he demanded that she get him something to eat. So finally, she always gave in, matter to the dickens, but gave in because she didn't want to hear it anymore. And so what she did is she went out and got some cat food, tuna flavored, made tuna flavored sandwiches for him. Of course, watch him get sick. And this was the same lady, of course, we told her it wasn't appropriate. This was the same lady that would, because of his abuse, she urinated in the toilet, took his toothbrush, put it up there and watched him brush his teeth. And you can imagine what the next thing I'm going to tell you. She did that too, stirred it up, put it up there and watched him brush his teeth. Now that is inappropriate. But that's what passive-aggressive people do. They just do. He didn't know it. And then when he found out, of course, then all hell broke loose. But it was a way to pay him back. Passive-aggressive people are full of paying somebody back, and whether the person knows or not is irrelevant because it's their way of getting, if you will, rid of their anger in an appropriate way. But it is one of the ways that people will do that. Unfortunately, they didn't stay married. Probably a good idea, but it was a mess. His addiction and her extremely passive-aggressive behavior. All right, physically. I mentioned earlier that physical problems occur with people who don't deal with their anger effectively, in part because when you look at that, we all live in stress. Part of when I was working down here is that Sharon over here, she's the administrative assistant over here for the Pavilion, and I had to interact with her, and every time I did, my stress went up. She told me I wasn't to pick on her, so I just showed her I did. But migraine headaches, there's lots of things that cause migraine headaches. One of those being the stress. Now we know there can be some physical issues that are separate from stress that can cause migraine headaches, but stress can cause migraine headaches, and again, stress is nothing but a mild form of anger. As you all know, feelings are on a continuum. We have feelings on this end with anger, for example, that's called rage, And then feelings on this end, that's irritation, aggravation, frustration on this anger continuum. So when you look at the anger, when you got rage here and these other milder forms of anger down here on this end, that's stress. Go all day long and being bombarded a day or hour after hour, minutes after minutes, pretty soon at the end of the day, you're just completely stressed out. But we don't call it that I've been frustrated all day or aggravated all day or just, we call it I'm stressed. And then the migraines start to occur. So we know that there's an impact when people don't deal with their anger effectively because of the migraines, because of this thing called stress. High blood pressure. Now, high blood pressure can be caused by other things, but people who are consistently under a great deal of stress, who have a great deal of don't deal with their anger effectively, they have high blood pressure. And if they have high blood pressure too long, what happens if it goes up too high? Yeah, you stroke, have heart attacks. When I was going to school, there was a guy by name, we call him Wild Ratke. I was working in a lumber yard, and this guy, he could not handle stress. And he was the manager of the lumber yard. And he was running around screaming and yelling at people, and I just waiting for him to burst. And then after about 2 years later, I find out that he died in his mid-40s. He just did not handle the stress, and he ate wrong, and he's way overweight, and smoked like a chimney, and did all the things that he shouldn't have been doing, and not dealing with that anger well. And finally, his body says, no more. No more. And so we know high blood pressure can be an issue. We know that, as I said, heart problems. Again, stress creates problems with the heart because of of how it causes that muscle to beat harder and faster. There's only so many beats that my heart has for the Australian knows how. Thank you. Very good, very good. He's actually from Austria, but I say he's from Australia, and he humors me. He's an extremely, extremely bright young man. This guy, he's one of the 3 people when I was working at Farley, when they began to talk, I just sat back and listened because I couldn't keep up with him. Very, very bright. Speaks 5 languages, and we're very lucky to have him. He's an extremely bright young man. That's not what his wife says, I might add. I've talked to her too. But heart problems. Thank you, Andreas. And then intestinal disorders. People have stomach problems because of not, of course, not eating right, but a lot of stress. Then what happens is that they have stomach issues, intestinal issues. They can't eat well. They get stomach indigestion on a regular basis, and just all kinds of issues with that. And so we know that that's an issue because of the stress. We know that fatigue. I mentioned you go all day long and getting pounded on, and at the end of the day, you're just wiped out, just completely wiped out. It was a day that you saw 3 patients and not 7. You saw 7 patients, everything went really well, there was no problem. You see 3, and because of the difficulty of them, they're all 3 borderlines, and what ends up happening, you, like nursing director over here, she... Oh, goodness, this is one of my better days. This fatigue, I get tired. And we don't understand stress will beat on us and beat on us and beat on us. When you think about it, what happens when you get scared? Your adrenaline pumps. I don't care if the adrenaline pumps 100 miles an hour or it's an excess amount of adrenaline. Pretty soon the body gets tired because the body is prepared to fight or flight because of the anxiety, because of the stress and the adrenaline that's being pumped into the system. So you can get fatigued. Jaw pain. People clench their jaws, and actually at some point potentially dental pain because of it, because of grinding their teeth and TMJ. I mean, the stuff that goes along with that. Rashes. People will actually begin to get spots on their body, because of the anxiety, because of the stress, because of the anger that goes along with this. And then hair loss. That's for some of us. That's we've obviously had a lot of stress. Yeah. So we lose hair. It's interesting. When I first saw this years ago, hair loss, but it makes sense because my body is doing what it has to do to protect itself, and growing hair is not the most important thing my body's going to do. It's going to do what it has to do to protect us. Now we know that there's some of it's got to do with hereditary, but hair loss can be created because we're not dealing with our stress or our anger in effective ways. Acne. A lot of people don't realize that when you're not dealing with your stress effectively, that you can break out in acne, even as old people. And we wonder, where in the hell did that come from? Well, take a look at what's happened. Look at what's going on in your life, and look at what the issues are for you, and you'll see that you've had a stressful time, and as a result, you've developed this acne. Sexual difficulties. Erectile dysfunction, lack of desire for sex, certainly not getting lubricated. That's all a part of sexual issues when people are having a lot of stress. Sex is not important to them. It just doesn't matter. Yeah. Even 19 and 20-year-olds, if they're under a hell of a lot of stress, it just doesn't mean anything to them. Take away the stress, then you know how that works. So these sexual problems that occur because of anger, because not dealing with it in an appropriate way. All right. Psychologically. Interesting thing about this psychological component is that when people aren't dealing with their anger effectively, it can manifest itself in recurring types of nightmares, right? Yeah, I bet you've heard that and had them maybe. Yeah. And so, and these are bizarre dreams, and they just go on and on and on, and no matter what you do, they don't seem to improve. You know, much as Freud did whatever he did, one of the things that he did talk a lot about was that anxiety helped to create nightmares. And that there's ways that needs to resolve it, and they go through all kinds of things. But the idea is that that these dreams that we have, because of the stress that we continually have over and over again, I mean, they're repetitive and they're bizarre. And no matter what we try to do to make sense of them, they just don't make any sense. You can talk about them until the cows come home. And it really has to do with you're not dealing with stress very well. So, all right. We have mood disorders. When you think about it, that if that we know. Hi, Shirley. Oh goodness. See, Shirley was my counterpart. I taught her everything she knows. But I didn't teach her everything I know. Anyway, mood disorders. We know that if people have this anger hard enough and long enough, one of the manifestations is what happens. People get depressed. They get depressed, and they get so depressed, and then when you deal with them, you deal with the depression, but how do you deal with the depression? You talk about what? The feelings that are associated with the depression. And more often than not, you're going to find a part of that is what? Resentments, right? Fear, hurt. So we know that all of that helps to create these mood disorders that people can have. We know anxiety disorders. People that have a lot of stress don't deal with anything. It builds up. There's energy and energy and energy and energy, and pretty soon there's just anxiety all over the place. When you ask people and talk to people about their anxiety, what do they usually come back to? I'm afraid, because anxiety means I'm afraid. And because they're not dealing with that effectively, that fear, and they're covering it up, they get this anxiety disorder, and it's all coming out in these horrible ways for themselves and again for other people. That doesn't mean that there aren't some biological things that help to create this. I'm not taking that away, but I'm saying that if the anger is not dealt with appropriately, these things can occur. All the medications in the world won't help that, by the way. Give everybody all you want, all that doggone, all the benzodiazepines for an anxiety disorder. I tell you what, all you're going to do is end up medicating it, and it's not going to solve it. And then if they have a propensity to become addicted, now you got somebody who's addicted to the benzos. Ma'am.
Well, what if they treat it with the SSRIs, which I thought they're supposed to do? Because are you saying that the anger and the stress cause imbalance in serotonin?
Can. Works both ways.
So the medication can help.
Depends. Yeah. Medication by itself, if you know that from the research, that nobody suggests medication by itself. Well, we do lots of things all the time, and we shouldn't. My wife, we coming down here together, she was going to 80 miles an hour, and so we do it all the time. We're not supposed to. All right. And then the resentments, and I've talked a little bit about that. Resentment, again, is nothing but reliving old anger. And I'm going to talk a lot about resentments in this next thing in a second, and that's self-pity. Because oftentimes people will see this individual in front of them, and they will see this person having all this quote-unquote depression, and really what it is self-pity. What's the difference between true, honest-to-God depression and self-pity? What's the difference between the two? Oh, come on. Nobody wants to take the risk? All right. It's what?
There isn't any. Depression is totally self-centered.
No, there is a difference. Yeah, there is. At least from what I've been taught.
There might be a difference between like true depression and self-pity. I think true clinical depression has a basis in biology, where it's a serotonin problem. And I think all of sort of the cognating in the world can't sort of catapult you out of it with a true clinical depression, as opposed to self-pity, which to me has sort of a ruminating element and just kind of sitting in it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Because when you think about it, depression is something that's resolvable by potentially with some medication and talk therapy. Or talk therapy. And you're changing and you're having them vent and do some cognitive thinking, right? Changes, right? Whereas self-pity, yes sir.
I just want to say that I find in the group I have here how respectful for sharing traumas among other people who have traumas.
Yeah.
And everybody carries the load with each other.
Right.
That's it.
That certainly helps, absolutely. Hearing that you're not alone, that there are other people who go through the same experiences that I do.
Well, when somebody has the courage to tell their story,
Right.
give somebody else the permission to do that.
Absolutely. 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 We know that works. You're absolutely right. With the self-pity, all the medication in the world won't solve it. You give people a whole bunch of the SSRIs, and guess what? If they have self-pity, guess what? Never ever improves, does it? It can't, because it's not a biological issue at all. It is what? A thinking issue. Self-pity and resentments are a thinking issue, not a feeling issue. Now, depression can be, in part, a thinking issue. Can be, and oftentimes is, along with the serotonin that the young lady mentioned. But we know that when it comes to self-pity, it really has to do with the thinking errors that we have as human beings. Because resentments and self-pity are exactly the same thing, they just come out a little different. Resentments and self-pity just means one thing: It's not fair. It's not fair. And you can take somebody, like this young lady was saying back there, or I think she was trying to say, is that you can talk about depression, some medication if needed, and then what happens, and you can talk about all these issues, and then what happens, it gets better. You can talk about self-pity and resentments till the cows come home, and nothing gets better. Medicate the hell out of them and talk about the resentments and self-pity, it won't get better. But you were right. Self-pity and resentment is a self-issue. It's not an external issue. Self-pity is that somehow I've been mistreated, I have been cheated, it isn't fair. Why does my brother get something I don't get? Why does mom and dad love him more than me? They gave him money to start a business, and now he's a millionaire. I can't get them to give me a damn nickel. Well, let's think that one through for a minute. Because he's what?
He's older.
Yeah, he's older. Yeah. Or he's the youngest one. He always gets favored. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the youngest and I didn't get nothing.
Okay. There you go. Yes, ma'am.
But I never resented it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
This is very good because what you're kind of reviewing is when you're trying to help somebody get back into balance from, if you want to call it self-pity, resentment, depression, there's many different strategies that you have to use because the cognition does cause a change in the feelings. It causes a change in feelings, changes your chemistry, your biology. It's very complicated.
Well,
Plus the genetics.
Well, when you look at self-pity, that the only thing I know how to make self-pity better is to change the way I think. And the changing the way I think is what did, not about that person and what they did, what about me? You got it. The thing, and I'm not going to say any more than this one statement on it, the thing that we're sorely lacking as a culture, taking responsibility. And that, I believe, is why we have all the damn problems, at least in part why we have. Nobody wants to be responsible.
Well, I was going to ask you that if you look at society, the things that's going on, and you look at like black males being shot unarmed, and you look at the kids, school shootings, what do you think is at the realm of that? As far as you think fear is included in that, you think resentment is included in that?
Oh.
What's your opinion?
I have lots of opinions. My biggest opinion is that we don't want to take accountability. None of us. I shouldn't say it that way. So many of it. Well, defend it or not, but the bottom line is we don't want to hold ourselves accountable because we've been taught somewhere along the line we don't have to be. Because mommy and daddy are going to take care of us, our brothers and sisters are going to take care of us, somebody is going to take care of us. We got a whole room full of people over there who won't take accountability. They're called addicts. They won't take responsibility. We got a whole world of people in this culture who will not take accountability. They're busy blaming everybody but themselves, and that's where self-pity comes from. It's your fault, your fault, your fault, not mine. My God, don't you see I'm different than the rest of you?
And then there also has to be some consequences.
That's the part of
If
the
you don't have any consequences, you continue to do what you do, it's okay.
that's a part of the accountability is getting the consequence. You're exactly right. You know, I wish I could tell you the solutions. It's real simple for me, is because my grandmother was very clear as I was growing up. You are accountable for what you do, and that switches out there will give you the consequences, and therefore, don't do it. Oh yes, ma'am. And so, the idea that with self-pity, see, we're not holding ourselves accountable, we're holding somebody else accountable. Resentments, we're holding somebody else accountable. It's somebody else's fault, not Don McCourtney's. It's somebody's fault but mine. Poor old me. I got a bad rap. Poor old me. So if this lady and I are sisters and brothers, and what happens is that I have this, still in that spot, there we go. I have this lady here, and I resent her and feel sorry for her, or for me, because she's getting all the good stuff. Well, why is she getting the good stuff? Well, she works hard, she's honest, She's doing the things that we like to see from responsible people. Not perfect. But me, what am I doing? I'm running around, not working, just doing what I can do to, work 1 day a week or 2 days a week, job after job. No wonder mom and dad gave you the money and not me. That makes sense. As a parent, I have 2 daughters, but as a parent, if one of my daughters was doing what they're supposed to be doing, I'm going to support her. The one that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, why would I give her the consequences for her inappropriate behaviors, positive things? It won't work. We've got a culture now that says that. And even before the culture today, hell, I was the same way. When I was active in my addiction, everybody's at fault but Don McCourtney. It was the cops. Just a second, we'll get there. It was the cops. It was my parents. My God, if you grew up the way I did, you would be the way you are too. But what the hell does that have to do when I'm 20 years of age driving a car under the influence when what happened to me was 4? There is no connection. But for some reason, as clinicians, some of us will want to make that connection and say, oh, honey, you had a hard life. I'm so sorry. Oh, puke. Oh, it's terrible. And of course, and I'm not so unique, but as a young man, I found a psychologist and I found a psychiatrist that bought into that. Let's talk about what happened with mommy and daddy. Let's talk about the party training problems you had. Well, the point is that no one held me accountable. And we know generally if you have a child that's not held accountable, the child is going to have problems. We know that if adults aren't held accountable, as a group, adults have problems. Self-pity is a way for me not to hold myself accountable, but to hold everybody else accountable because there's something horribly that's happened to me. And everybody in this room has had something horrible happen to them. There's no question about it. Some of us to a greater degree than others, but every one of us have had issues where we have been victimized by a perpetrator. It's just a part of being a human being. And some of them much greater than others. But for us to feel sorry for ourselves, that doesn't help that pain to go away. It just enhances it. Because we're angry as hell that it's going on. And we're resentful as hell that it's happened. You had a question? Comment?
Maybe it's a really simple question, but self-pity, and I looked at victimization, or people that get stuck in the victim role, is that, in your opinion, the same, different, or mixed?
Absolutely the same. Because if I see myself as a victim, I feel sorry for me. Poor old Don, 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 poor old... Go through my life. I've been victimized. Well, that person or situation is so pronounced now that you're being victimized again and again and again, even though it occurred 30 years ago. And I'll tell you a story here in a little bit about a person who victimized himself for over 49 years from something that happened when he was a child and just destroyed his life. Damn right he was victimized. But the person who victim didn't even know he was around. And then what happens is that we think that, and I'll give you a break, because I was told I had to, we think that these are justified. There is no such thing as a justified resentment. And I've heard clinicians, and I've heard other people, well, they got a right to resent. Really? They have a right to die too. And we don't want them to die. They have a right to be happy. We don't want them to be unhappy. There is no such thing as a justified resentment. It's an oxymoron. Ma'am?
Okay. I'm sitting there thinking, if it's me, I might certainly have some resentments about something. And what I'm assuming you're saying is what isn't okay is to stay there.
Exactly.
Because if someone's been hurt,
Yep.
they have a right to their feelings.
Right.
I might totally relate, but then I gotta.
Right.
Okay.
But resentment's not a feeling. It's a thought process. It's not fair. Once I change the way I'm no longer thinking it's not fair, then I will no longer have the resentment. Then I can deal with the anger and the hurt. But as long as I think things aren't fair, I'm justified in thinking and believing and acting the way I do.
What about
It's like
the fact
peeling
that-
an onion.
Well, let's say something is unfair, but then, okay, let's get used to it and move on, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
All right,
You
just
can
checking.
you can use the resentment to fuel something positive
Right.
for you to do. That's what I do. I mean, I got resentments, and I don't act out on them negatively on people. I just try and react to it in a positive way by doing things I can do to help other people.
Right.
With stuff I went through in my addiction, stuff like that. So I got resentments, but I don't know going to stop me from growing.
Right. And the idea again is that resentments and self-pity means it's not fair. They are not feelings. They're thought processes. Because you can talk about a resentment till the cows come home. And you can talk about self-pity until the cows come home. And guess what? It never resolves. If you ever work with an addict, addicts get around other addicts, and guess what they do? They cry in their beer. And the other addict's crying in their beer, and the other addict's crying, and they're all telling whoppers. Horrible life I've had. Oh yeah, okay, I've had one too. Oh my God, I've got all this misery. That's a resentment that can't be solved by talking about it. It has to have a thinking process. Yes, ma'am.
How do you suggest healing? Because I feel like we've all had, like, in our personal lives, that one toxic person who always frustrates us. So how would you suggest moving past that, but also understanding, like...
Can we get to that in a little bit? I'm just not going to tell you the problems. I'm going to give you some solutions too. Telling you problems doesn't solve the issue. You got to know some solutions. Oh, by the way, this thing, it's not fair. When we have children and our children come to us and say, that's not fair, what do we say? What the hell's the difference? Just because we become an adult, things are supposed to be fair? All right, let's take a break. Thanks, guys. Let me ask you a question. If you're doing group therapy and you were trying to get that group therapy started and your patients were doing this, what would you be doing? Raising your hand? Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Me, I tell them to knock it off. Not that nice either. We're trying to go to work. Anyway, I thought you guys had some good questions, and I appreciate that. And I thought that it helped to add to what we were trying to accomplish. Hopefully, I want to tell a couple stories. Before I do that, though, some young lady, where did she go? Some young lady came up to me, and we'll talk about that later. But some other young lady, there it is. One of the things that this young lady was telling me, which made a lot of sense on break, was that people struggle with wanting to be accountable because it's scary. That means they have to change. And that's exactly right. Well, yeah, they got to do something different, and that's something they don't want to do. So there was those of you who are familiar with Nebraska, Nebraska is a very rural type of state, and there was this little town in the western part of Nebraska that had this chemical plant that caught on fire, and all these different volunteer fire departments came out to put out that fire, and the fire just kept getting worse and worse. And what happened was that the guy that was the president of that chemical company says, you know, our secrets for these chemicals are in our safe. I will give that department that can go in and save those secrets, I will give them $50,000 for their department. Well, there wasn't any way because the fire got worse. Some more fire engines came in, and he says, now look, here's the deal. Went through the same scenario, although I'll give you $100,000. It was still too bad. pretty soon they see this one little old beat up truck come running through there with some old guys about my age, 64, 5, 7 years of age, come running through there, and that doggone truck just kept right on going, right into that fire. The guys jump out and they're battling the fire and they put the fire out, and it's nothing any of these firemen had ever seen in their lives. These old guys got that fire out. And the president of the company was so grateful, he says, look, I'll give you guys $200 or $200,000 for you to get a new truck and whatever other things you may need. This is yours. And the reporter that was on the scene talked to the 71-year-old, 74-year-old chief of that particular fire truck, says, well, with all that money, what are you going to do with it? He said, well, first thing we're going to do is going to get those brakes fixed on that truck. I told you I was funny. I was looking at you, dear. I told you I was funny. Now I'll tell you a story that's not funny at all. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is I don't feel sorry for people. The patients that I've seen in my career, I do not feel sorry for. A, it doesn't help them. And B, it impedes the therapeutic process. I know of a situation, unfortunately, where this little girl, about 4 years of age, was doing what 4-year-old little girls do. They play. And she got tired. And when little kids get tired, one of the things they often do is what? They whine. As adults, we whine. We call it being crabby. Same thing. So she was whining, where the male caretaker in her life yelled at her to quit whining. Well, now you got the little girl who's not only tired, but now she's scared. So what do you think her whining decreased? No, it increased. And so he grabbed her and smacked her on the butt, told her to quit whining. So do you think the whining slowed down? No, because not only is she scared, not only is she tired, but now her bottom hurts. So the whining increased. He lost control. He picked her up, and he threw her against the wall ad nauseum. Broke her back. Injured her brain. And she was left on a life support to keep her alive. And eventually the family had to decide to take her off life support because she couldn't live on her own. I use that story because I feel sorry for. This story was given to me years and years ago. And I truly believe that young lady, if she had a choice, she would trade places with anybody in this room. I feel sorry for. Everybody in this room, all the patients that I deal with or have dealt with, they have a choice. Her choice was taken away from her. That I feel sorry for. I don't feel sorry for any human being except when the choice is so completely taken away. So I know I get people irritated when I talk about you can feel sorry for yourself, but the reality is that I don't care. I don't care what happened to you because it irritates them. But the bottom line is, I don't care what happened to them. That's not going to solve anything. So I understand what happened, but what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do for you? That little girl, nothing, at least at that time, medically, could have helped her in the situation she found herself in that she had absolutely nothing to do with, except being a little kid. Okay. It's a horrible story. As I mentioned earlier on, anger affects us spiritually as well. And spirituality, as I mentioned, is strictly having positive relationships with me and positive relationships outside of me. When I'm not dealing with my anger very well, I'm not going to have a very positive relationship with me. Because all that anger, if it's not, of course, I'm not dealing with it effectively, resentment, self-pity, all that negative energy, and all the conflict that goes along with that. And my guilt for stepping outside my value system, belief system, or hurt people I care about because I'm so angry, because I'm not dealing with the anger effectively, and now I feel horrible because I'm doing all that. So I'm not going to feel very good about me, so I'm not going to have a very good relationship with who I am as a human being. And then, well, that was nice. I must have done that one. Then, as I said, it's a lack of positive relationship with other people and everything else. I mean, the bottom line is if this young lady and I work together and I'm continually hammering her and going at her and telling her and exploding on her and doing all this stuff, eventually, what do you think she's going to do? She's going to quit. Or maybe, as old as I am, as young as she is, she gets up and pops me in the nose, and I break, and she doesn't. But eventually, we don't have a relationship. What happens is that she doesn't want anything to do with me. And if I ever try to be nice, then she goes, uh-oh, what's he looking for? He's never been nice to me. In some places, she decides to take it to human resources and file a complaint for a hostile workplace. Because I'm treating her in such a way that is inappropriate, Gesundheit, and that's so inappropriate that she cannot deal with what's going on because it's a bombardment. And so how in the world can I possibly have a positive relationship with life if that's how I'm treating human beings around me? If I'm treating people with less than dignity, honor, and respect, how can I possibly be spiritual? That doesn't mean we all make mistakes. We all say things that we regret. But if it's a continual bombardment, that's a whole other ballgame. That's called what? Abuse. So these spirituality, because if we don't deal with, as I said, the anger effectively, then none of this is going to happen. If none of this is happening, then I don't have a spiritual life. If I don't have a spiritual life, then I got nothing. Now, that's not good language, but the bottom line is, I got nothing if I'm not spiritual. Because how in the hell can I possibly have a relationship with anything if I'm not taking care of my relationships? Can't have a thing. Because one of the things that we know that tends to hurt people immensely is when there's no connectedness. And we found that by having connectedness with human beings, one with another, that a lot of the issues kind of go away. We need other people. We need some emotional connectedness. If you ever look at the survivors of the Holocaust and the emptiness in their eyes, and it isn't necessarily that, and although I'm sure it was certainly a part of it, is when they saw people get loaded up on the cars and go. But part of that emptiness in their eyes, if you believe what Viktor Frankl wrote, is that they wouldn't make a connectedness again with another human being because people were leaving and going away and not coming back, and they had all that pain because of the loss. So why would I, if my sister goes away and this lady here is I don't want to be friends with her, because she's gone, I don't want the same response again, and I have no control of when and where and if it's going to happen. So I start to die a little bit inside. And I know this isn't just about that addicts aren't the only one that walk around with this emptiness, but if you ever look at an addict who's active and they're using, their eyes are empty of life because the drug is taking it away. And I've seen other people who aren't addicted, the same thing. But the point is, the eyes tells us so much. And so if I don't have relationships with me or anybody else because of this anger, then I don't have anything. All right. All right. Now, how's this thing? There we go. Now, I want to talk a bit about anger and control. Then I'm going to get some solutions here. I see that I'm starting to run out of time. Now, anger, as I said earlier, we try to control and it doesn't work. First off, we all know that control is an issue, is an illusion, right? Because who can you control? Can you control anybody else? No. Not at all. How about a 5-year-old? Can you control a 5-year-old? No. Can you control your spouses? No. Your significant others? Your bosses? Your subordinates? No. Can you control your dogs? No. It's kind of, sort of. Yeah, that's the word, sometimes. Yeah. We can't control anybody but ourselves, and it's an illusion to think that we can. And of course, then the control creates conflict, which is a part of that anger cycle that we can get into. Because if I'm trying to control Bianca up here, and she wants no part of it, there's going to be conflict. She may say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I react in an angry way because, damn it, I want her to do that. Doesn't she know who I am? I'm Dom Courtney. I'm God. She's just a girl. What does she know? I'm a guy, right? Oh, come on now, guys. That was a joke. She's told me more than once because I'm a guy doesn't mean that I'm smarter. And I have to agree. She's another one of those smart people. I'll just sit back and watch because I can't keep up. Social. Of course, if I'm trying to control the world around me in order to not to have the fear, and then I'm going to have problems socially because nobody wants me in their lives trying to control them. It's not fun. And of course, then there's physical issues, and we talked about that as I'm trying to control people. And the psychological, we talked about all that. That is all impacted, and there it is. That's the one I was looking for. So all 4 of those life areas that we're made up of as human beings were impacted because we're trying to control. And control and anger are very closely related. I control from fear, and when my control doesn't work, I get angry because I'm trying to protect my fear. All right. There's 3 ways that I primarily use. There's other ways, but these are my 3 favorites, if you will. 3 effective ways to deal with anger and to deal with it in a way that it's productive rather than unproductive. And I wish I could say I do these things perfectly. I'm reminded regularly I don't in lots of different ways. So when we look at what happened here. Oh, come on. Somebody changed that one up on me. All right, let's try this one. First thing is you share feelings. Another one is there's forgiveness, and another one is changing the way you think. I'm not sure how that got up there that way, but I must have done it. I haven't had a drink in 44 years, and so I don't even remember any of this. It must be my CRS going on. But you share your feelings, you change your thoughts, and then forgiveness. And I want to talk about all 3 of those. There we go. When you share feelings, we all know that at this point that the way you share your feelings is using I statements, right? You don't use you statements. You made me angry. You hurt me. You scared me. Really? Yeah, that's right. You have the power to get me angry. You have the power to do all of that, right? Now, I am the only person that has that power. I feel, and my feelings are my responsibility. Feelings are neither right nor wrong. They just exist. And it's my responsibility to deal with them in an effective way. And the best way I know how to do that is using I statements. And as far as I'm concerned, that when the I statements that help me to stay away from blaming somebody is a 3-word sentence. I feel angry. Grammatically, that's correct. In 3 words. I put a period after that, and everybody knows I feel angry. There are people who will say, I feel that you're wrong. That's not a feeling. That is nothing but a bunch of words that we use to say that's how I felt, but it isn't a feeling, it's a thought process. I feel hurt and sad and frustrated about what you just said and did. That's really all there is to it. And yet sometimes it's so hard to do that because what happens is that when we share these feelings, we think the other person's supposed to change. Now, Carly up here, for example, when, see, I'll get you off the phone. Carly up here, for example, you notice when I was their bosses, they never did that, you see? Never. They just get up and leave the room. So, and so Carly up here, if I say to her, I feel angry that you did that, then I believe she's supposed to change. You see, I'm angry, and you're supposed to change that. That is not what the purpose of sharing feelings are about. It's to get that energy out of me. Now, there's feelings that are very positive feelings, happiness, joy, ecstasy. We get all that stuff, and we let those out generally pretty well. We run around, and we yell, and we scream, and in football teams, they pat each other on the butt, give each other headbutts or high fives and all that stuff. Particularly because Nebraska hasn't lost a football game in the last 50 years. There's a lot of those high fives going on. On my TV, they haven't lost any games. That cost her. So when you share how you feel, the objective is not to get the person to change. You share the feelings to get the energy out. And hopefully start communications. But that's not a guarantee. Right? Right. And so I feel hurt when you didn't say good morning to me. And I feel sad. I thought we had a better relationship. And I also feel angry because I thought I was ignored. That's all there's to it. And yet we struggle with that simplicity. Now, what can happen when I share how I feel, I forgot your name. Fred. Fred may say to me, well, I didn't hear you. Well, that solved the problem. Or he may say, I don't like you. I never have, and I'm not talking to you. Well, at least I know where I stand, right? But most of us, if Fred is that assertive and says that, most of us, we got to figure out, how do I get Fred to like me now? Or rotten him, now I'll pay him back. I'm going to get even now, see? Yeah. And if I can, I'm going to set it up so I can get ahead, for the love of God. So when I share how I feel, you share the feelings, get the energy out, hopefully get a communication process started, and as a result, the relationship can grow. Some of the things that people will do, I know how you're feeling. Really? Absolutely. I know how you feel. Tell me how you know how I feel. I've been there. Really? I just think that is just weird. We can all have the same problem happen to our lives, but that doesn't mean we're all going to perceive it in the same way and have come away with the same feelings. I can only imagine what you must be experiencing. I lost a child too, but I can only imagine what you're experiencing, because my experience is different than yours. And you're right. By sharing those experiences with one another, relieves us with some of that energy and sees we're not alone. But none of us can really absolutely imagine what the other person's going through, because we're all different people, and yet we're all the same. All right. then the next thing is changing these thoughts that create these feelings. And most of you guys know all this, is what this is all about. We started out calling it RET. And then when REBT, REGT, ABC, DEF, CBT, DBT, DON, ALD, I mean, it just goes on and on. But unfortunately, we so often think that events cause how we feel. And as a result of that, we don't understand that events can't possibly cause us how we feel. That's a lack of being responsible, that lack of accountability that I talked about earlier. Events cannot possibly cause us to feel. Because if the events cause us to feel, then we'd all be feeling the same thing about everything. And that just doesn't happen. Because then you all think I'm the greatest comedian in the world and I wouldn't do what I do for a living, and I'd be down in Las Vegas and getting paid $1,000 a person coming in to see me when I do a stand-up comedy act, and I got thousands of people seeing me. Oh, come on, I thought that was a pretty good example. Nobody's laughing. Thank you, Dorian. I appreciated your support on that one. So events are things that we see and hear and that occur in our lives. The thoughts of these events, as you all know, cause us to feel. Our thoughts come from what? Our experiences, our values, our beliefs. And so the thoughts of what we see and what we hear cause us to feel. And so what do? We have to go in and take a look at the thinking processes. Because thoughts can be erroneous. Feelings are neither right or wrong, but thoughts are neither right. Thoughts can be erroneous. We know all kinds of thoughts that based upon assumptions, assumptions aren't truth. They're based upon faulty thinking processes. And if we assume something to be true and it's not, we got all kinds of feelings that never needed to have occurred. And then, of course, then we know actions occur. I get up on 64. By the way, those of you who've never driven in LA or Las Vegas, Nevada, driving on 64 is just as bad. It's horrible. Might be worse, somebody said. Yeah, might be. I was up there one day, and I absolutely couldn't get out of the person's way. I was in that left lane. I could not get out of the way, and somebody was right. They had to be inches from the back end of my vehicle. And they were in a hurry. I couldn't get around. I had somebody in front of me. Didn't matter to them. So, I tapped my brake very lightly just to hope that they'd back off a little bit. So I got over as quickly as I could. And you know what that person did? He got in front of me and slammed on his brakes. So I get into the left lane. Guess what he did? He moved to the left lane and slammed on his brakes again. Driving up there is a nightmare. So what happens if somebody cuts me off on the highway? We often do what? Get angry. And sometimes when we get angry because we get cut off on the highway, what do? Come on, nobody in here is innocent. You what? You honk your horn. You flip them off. Or you do what this clown did with me, right? And why would you do that? Why would you behave that way because somebody cut you off? Because of what you thought. Because what were your thoughts? When somebody cuts you off, what are you thinking? That's a feeling that comes from the thought. What were you thinking? Just like I said, that clown cut me off. That's it. He could have hurt me. She could have hurt me. That clown is a judgment call. It means I've judged this person to be a clown, idiot, whatever you want to call him. Because he could have hurt me. But the bottom line is, I think of all these rotten names, and I may even say them. We shake our fist, honk our horn. What happens? We flip them off. Some of us are so aggressive, we pull out a handgun and we point it at them. For what reason? Yeah.
going to say, I hope I don't run into you on the road.
Depends who you are. Depends who you are. Because somebody may say, I don't care. Not mine. Thoughts are tricky, absolutely. Thoughts are, so much of our thinking process are based upon assumptions. And we can see the same accident, 4 of us in this room, one walk away, they're feeling sad because somebody was injured, somebody walk away being afraid because somebody injured, somebody's angry because somebody's injured, and somebody not caring one way or the other because it wasn't mine. No one's right or wrong, but the feelings that react from those thoughts that I have because, well, it's not mine, or, geez, I don't want to see somebody hurt. Nobody's right or wrong. It's just the way it is. But we won't let other people have their thoughts, have their feelings, because we're damned to be we're bound and determined to believe I'm right, you're wrong, and you need to believe my way, or there's something wrong with me, or there's certainly something wrong with you. So instead of these thoughts on this example of the highway, did I get hurt? No. Did anybody get hurt? No. So what does it matter? That's really what it comes down to. What does it matter? But we're so busy wanting to control, and these assumptions are part of the control issues. It allows us to judge others. We turn people from people we depersonalize them, we objectify them, instead of letting them be a human being and that didn't do any damage with this example. And these thoughts, that's the piece that when I talked about resentments and self-pity, that we have to begin to change. Because things aren't fair, and because things aren't fair, I'm angry, and I'm going to act out that anger and hurt me and other people in the process. Yeah, I believe that can happen, but so often people will point out to us how we are impacting their lives, and we don't want to hear it because we know that we're right. And that we may not see. You're exactly right about that. And so what happens is that when you look at this, sometimes the thoughts, the guy cut me off. So what? He's not a jerk. He's not a clown. How do I know if he did it on purpose? How do I know if he's a clown? I don't know anything about him. No one got hurt. That's all I know. That's all that matters. Well, some lady up there said something about things being fair in life. And that's a part of what I'm going to have to deal with and look at the thinking process that's associated with that. The question I always have, how many times have I cut somebody off? Accidentally. How many times did I drive aggressively because I needed to get someplace quicker than I really needed to? And did I really intentionally want to hurt somebody in that process? And that's all part of that thinking process that has to change. There are people, because of accidents, who are impacted. But the question always is, did the person do it on purpose? I don't know. I've been impacted. What am I going to do now? I can have a spinal injury, and I can be forever paralyzed, but I don't have to be forever bitter. I can lose sight in my eyes, but I don't have to be forever bitter. I think that somebody told me a long time ago, it is so important when horrible things happen to me that I don't let that person or incident rent space in my head that allows for me to continue to be miserable.